Hello, my name is Rebecca Piercy. I'm the owner of Windsor House Nannies in Austin and San Antonio, Texas. And I am here this evening on behalf of the US Nanny Association with the wonderful Patrick DeFiore. Did I say that right? And Trevor Sparks from GTM Payroll Services. And tonight we will be discussing the new tax rule that was launched at the beginning of 2022 that affects using payment apps such as Venmo or PayPal. And we're going to discuss how that can affect nannies and sitters and being paid via those payment apps. But first, how are you, Patrick and Trevor?
We're doing well. Thanks for having us on this evening.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Great to see you again. I think it's been, what, about a year since we did this the last time.
Has it been a year?
Let's do it.
Gosh, everything, since the pandemic started 2 years ago, everything has just been like a blur, and I can't keep track of anything, but gosh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for hopping on again this evening. Yeah. Let me introduce everyone to both of you. So I'll start with you, Patrick. Patrick joined GTM in 2018 in the Household Service Department with more than 7 years of experience in customer service, working in retail management, insurance, and financial advising. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration and is well-versed in household employment. Patrick provides guidance and resources to nanny agencies around the country to help them and their families understand nanny tax and payroll obligations, employee benefits like health insurance and retirement, and best practices for being a household employer. And Trevor Sparks is the marketing manager for GTM Payroll Services, which specializes in household payroll processing, tax management, and compliance for families that hire employees to work in their homes. He has developed numerous presentations for accounting and household employment conferences on the latest labor compliance rules for families with household help and how to handle nanny payroll and taxes the right way. Trevor also develops and produces GTM's in-house webinars for accountants and writes regularly on the topic of household employment compliance for GTM's blog. So he is a pro at this. So let's get stuck in. So first of all, what is this new tax rule that we're talking about that was implemented at the start of 2022? Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll jump in here.
Okay.
I'll start by saying that first off, let's just address that this is at this time still a very large gray area. There's information out there, but it's limited. But at the same time, we need to take this information and we need to utilize it in the way that it's being pushed, because God knows what's going to happen. And we don't want to do something against what Venmo or the IRS is addressing, which is ultimately going to cause bigger issue for taxation. But with that being said, what this new rule is addressing is that any exchange for goods or services via an online platform, whether it be Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, there's a million of them out there, regardless of what the name of the app is now that, again, goods and services, whether it be nannying, going to the barbershop, getting your nails done, anything that exceeds $600, a 1099 is going to be produced. And at this point in time, why I say a gray area is because we have not seen this pan out yet. So we don't know to what extent they're going to crack down on this. But at the same time, like I had said before, everybody needs to kind of be cautious, because if you're already being W-2'd, but your employer is paying you through Venmo or whatnot, then you got a W-2 and a 1099. What do we do then? So the biggest thing here is what it comes back to is making sure that from the get-go, whether you as a nanny or as an employer are making sure that you're in compliance and doing this the way that it's expected to be done, or else you're just going to run into problems like we're talking about now.
Right. And I guess that's the biggest concern for this new tax rule being introduced. But I mean, to begin with, and let's focus, because there's two different jobs we're talking about, nannies and babysitters. They are two different classifications. So let's focus on nannies to begin with. Because really, you shouldn't really be probably paying your nanny via one of these cash apps anyway, correct?
That is very much correct, because there's no tax implications involved, which, hey, me, you, nobody wants to pay taxes, but it's very important because you're contributing to Social Security and Medicare, one, but you're also giving yourself a verifiable income. And I talk to people where they don't have that income and you want to get a new car or rent a new place. You can have a big pocket full of money, but if you don't have any paper trail to show where that came from, people don't look at that as being legitimate money. And that's the same ideal here when it comes to the Cash App and Venmo. But yeah, like you said, right off the bat, anybody who has not even a full-time job, but you're making in excess of $2,400 a year in this calendar, I mean, that's a couple weeks worth of pay, let's be real. So you need to be on the books, you need to be a W-2 employee, and you need to be paid above board, which Zelle, Cash App, all of those applications would not support the ideal of compliance. So yeah, when it comes to nannies, it's just a no right from the start, whether you're accounting for taxes or not, because I know there's services out there where they will help with the taxation component, but don't necessarily issue a direct deposit. But then you're running into, again, this weird gray area where you're going to get the 1099 because we don't know if Venmo is going to automatically issue the 1099.
Well,
So
they're
again,
supposed to. So they say they are. So we'll have to take them at their word.
Which actually, so they've said that they're going to automatically issue this 1099, right? They've said this. We don't know if we haven't seen it happen yet. This is the first
Correct.
year.
Correct.
Who are they issuing it to? Who gets it?
The babysitter will get the nanny will get the form. It's called a 1099K. So a little bit different than there's a various number of 1099s, but this will be a 1099K. And they'll receive it next January if they exceed. So right now the threshold is $600. If you receive $600 in payments by mobile apps that are assigned as business services, then you'll get that 1099K. So the big change was that before this year, the babysitter or nanny had to have at least 200 transactions worth $20,000. So a lot of babysitters obviously flew under the radar. They weren't getting 1099, even though they were supposed to report that income. There was no paper trail. So what this new rule does is it, lowers that threshold to $600, which babysitters probably can make in a month or a summer. So a lot more babysitters and nannies are going to get swept up by this. So they'll get the 1099. And if you're a full-time nanny and you're paid on the books and your family's giving you a W-2, and now what happens?
So just to confirm the sort of system, and I know this is all new, so there's some gray area to this, but so let's say you're a nanny, you're a babysitter. Are these payment apps tracking? Let's say we're not even a nanny or a babysitter. Let's just say, hey, I got paid $650 for this couch that I sold via Venmo. I'm going to get a 1099K. Now, it's different because this is not an employment arrangement.
Right. Correct.
So these cash apps are tracking if you receive more than $600. And is it in overall transactions or is it based on one individual? If I receive $600.
Yep, $600. If you meet that threshold, you'll get that 1099K.
Okay.
Yep. Goods or services.
Right. So now with PayPal and Venmo, there's that whatever you call it, the families and friend mode, and then there's the business and services. So what Venmo and PayPal are saying, now this is what they're saying, so we'll see if it goes into effect, is that they're gonna track that differentiation. So if you're a family and you're paying your nanny, $500 a week every Friday, and you're saying, oh, family and friends, supposedly Venmo and PayPal are going to be like, wait a minute, that they're going to flag that and say, this looks like more like a business and services because it's that regular payment. So, trying to skirt around the rule that way by saying family and friends, which you use, if you go out to eat and you want to split the bill, you Venmo me $50, that's still fine. You're not going to get tagged for that. You're going to be fine with that. That's still family and friends. It's that when you, like Patrick mentioned a couple other examples, the barbershop, or you're paying, your lawn care, or your nanny, those should be business and services category, and that's what Venmo and PayPal is going to track for that 1099K.
Okay, I'm gonna do some deep diving here. So and we might not have the answers to this, but okay. So let's say I sign up for Venmo, and I'll be honest, I don't remember what you have to provide to sign up for Venmo, but I would imagine you don't have to provide your social security number, but you would provide like an email. So number one, are you now required to provide like an address, and then they're going to have to mail this to you? I'm trying to think about all the logistics, which we might not know about yet, about, okay, so this Cash App knows that they have to send me a 1099 because I received X, Y, and Z. Well, number one, how do they get it to me? Do they now have my address that they're going to send it to? How do they confirm that's my actual valid address? What if I actually don't receive it in the mail? Am I still liable for it? Like, these are all of my questions.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, you got to remember that Venmo, everything is linked to a bank account. So you could sign with Ronald McDonald under a fake email address, but unless you steal somebody's identity and open up a bank account, it's always going to be linked back to you. And that's how it's going to be tracked, because that go right back to checking, savings account, even a debit or a credit card. It's always going to be linked in one way or another, whether you use a brand new email address that you just created or a fake name, it's going to be linked back to a bank account. So unless you're some kind of super criminal that's really going about trying to skirt around a 1099, which probably is not worth the effort, but it's always going to be linked back to you.
And babysitters will be contacted by Venmo and PayPal if they are noticing that that individual is being paid frequently. Then they'll be asked to provide their social security number or their individual tax ID number if they don't have a social security number. And actually, supposedly, again, this is all new, if they don't provide that information, they won't be able to continue using Venmo or PayPal to be paid for their services. So Venmo is going to be tracking that. And if you look, they're over that 600, we need their social security number so we can get that 1099. If you don't give it to them, you won't be able to use the platform. Again, this is all what Venmo and PayPal is saying, and we'll see how it plays out in the real world.
Right.
Yeah, and Rebecca, just to elaborate on that, I have the Venmo terms and services up right now, and it states in here, for example, PayPal is required to report to the IRS the total amount of payment for goods and services you receive each calendar year into your PayPal accounts, including Venmo accounts associated with the same tax ID number once you receive more than X amount of dollars, blah, 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 blah. A lot of detail, but $600 is obviously the bare minimum.
Right.
So, yeah. They're really
points. Yes. So this is all tracked. This is all being tracked. So, and from my
Yes.
understanding, in terms of who is responsible for this, it's the nanny, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So nannies need to be very aware now that if you are a babysitter getting paid by multiple families via these cash apps and you exceed that $600, there's going to potentially be some complications, but that's your responsibility as the nanny and the babysitter.
Right. I mean, they should already have been reporting that income. I mean, this is not a new tax. It's just a new tax reporting rule. So it's just now easier to, I suppose, get caught for not reporting that income. But that's so it's just lowering that threshold and making it more essential to be reporting that income.
Well, let's talk about then this misclassification, because we all know nannies cannot be 1099 independent contractors, they're W-2 employees. So in the event that, let's say that they do get paid more than $600 via a cash app, what's going to happen?
Well, so with a 1099, what everybody has to remember is that it's a misclassification that's been really enhanced by CPAs and accountants, if I'm going to be honest. And Trevor, you can probably agree, because
Yep. It is.
It's an easy amendment for them. It's an easy way for them to tie together the year, account for the wages. But what nannies and babysitters don't understand is that with this 1099, they're viewed as both the employer and the employee. So you're taking on essentially double the taxation because you're looking at being both sides of the coin. Where like with a landscaper, that's a 1099. They own their own business. They're doing things on their own terms. Whereas a nanny, a babysitter, you're expected to be there at X time and work till whenever. And throughout the course of the day, you need to do this, that, and the other thing, whether it's bathe the kids, feed the kids, take them wherever. There's a set schedule and routine. Whereas an independent contractor, again, your landscaper comes over. Of course, they're not going to come over at 6 o'clock in the morning and be egregious about it, but they're going to come over at some point during the day. They'll take the time that they need, and they've already worked out a set price. They work on their own time with their own tools, in which no nanny is doing that. So again, not only is it a misclassification, it's they're shooting themselves in the foot by being a 9. So that's the bigger thing that a lot of people don't realize.
So let's because obviously with nannies we know you need to be W-2s, but let's talk about babysitters because it is a different job role. Can a babysitter ever be classified as a 1099?
It depends. I mean, Trevor, do you want to shed some light on?
Excuse me, it depends because they don't have a set schedule. I mean, they're sort of, and they can work for multiple families. So that's a big difference between a nanny and a babysitter. A nanny, the family is relying on them. They'll set the schedule. Hey, 8:30 to 6, you're here Monday through Friday. This is the stroller you're going to use. This is the equipment you're going to use in the kitchen. This is how I want you to discipline my child, or this is what I want you to do with my child during the day. It's all, it's all controlled by the family. Whereas a babysitter doesn't have a regular schedule. They may do a date night on Saturday. They might not be needed for a couple of weeks. And then maybe the summer they get a couple of days they need to work. So in that case, it could fall into a 1099 kind of area.
Okay.
Well, I'll also just add in there here quick, Rebecca, sorry to cut you off, but I deal with a lot of families. That's a lot of what I do here at GTM is consult with families, but many of them will say, oh, I have a babysitter. Okay, well, what's the schedule? Oh, well, she comes in at 4 and works until 7 every day. Well, when you do that 5 days a week, that's a 15-hour-a-week work schedule, in which if you're paying somebody $25 an hour, you're far exceeding that $2,400. So just because you classify them as a babysitter, just because it's after school care, it might not be your traditional nanny or the Mary Poppins that we all think of, but they are exceeding that threshold. So whatever title you put on them is just, that's your opinion, but it doesn't mean that they're not falling into the same tax category as a full-time nanny.
Right. Yeah. If they're working those regular hours, think of an after-school nanny or a tutor, let's say, who maybe comes in, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 hours a day. And, if that's a set schedule, that's a regular schedule, you hit that $2,400, the nanny tax threshold, you're on the hook as an employee. So. Yeah.
So basically the rule of thumb is if you pay somebody over $2,400 in a year, they are now classified as a nanny, and you need to be getting an EIN and employer taxes and all that good stuff. Yep. I guess the gray area, the real gray area is, for what if a family isn't paying a nanny or a babysitter? Let's classify them. A babysitter over $2,400 in a year. But let's say they pay them $2,000, right? So it's over the 600, but you've paid them $2,000. The sitter gets issued a 1099. And is this where there's some gray area right now, where it's like, is now a babysitter classified as a 1099?
Right. So this is the interesting part of the rule, because the rule was aimed at internet sellers, so to speak, who can skirt that. Maybe they were using the Venmo and Cash apps to kind of skirt the IRS. So that's why it was lowered to that $600. Because these businesses were using, Venmo and PayPal to get around traditional forms of reporting their income, so to speak. So the IRS wanted to make more transactions reportable and harder for businesses to underreport their taxable income. The problem then is that, the nannies and babysitters kind of got swept up in this, and now, they're W-2 employees, maybe they're getting a 1099, and, that maybe not have been the piece that was thought through all the way, because they were so focused on the businesses, which, there's probably many more businesses who were kind of getting around the reporting rules by using Venmo than nannies and babysitters. But so it'll be interesting to see if they catch up with that and how this plays out in January.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the biggest question that I get from agencies is like, what goes on between 600 and 2,400?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, they're going to get the 1099 because they've met the sixes. So what I've told everybody is just, and this is the key point here, is stay away from the applications. Just stay away from them. That's going to be your best bet. I mean, always your best bet is going to be compliant. And to do things above board, do it as a W-2. Don't mess with the IRS. It's not worth it. It's not worth the penalties. Depending on what state you live in, they'll penalize you even worse. But the point is that we don't know. That is a weird area where, do they get the 1099? They fell under the W-2. But again, if you're paying kind of that date night babysitter, and a lot of families are very generous nowadays, just do it in cash. Stop by the ATM. I get that it's convenient, but you can't. It's hard to make an argument that, oh, you took a couple $100 out of an ATM, you paid your nanny with it. But with Venmo, you see it on a regular basis. Like Trevor was saying, they're going to catch on to these patterns.
Right, and it's just it just complicates things, doesn't it? Right, because for a while it was like, oh, it's simplified paying babysitters.
Right. Yep.
You don't have to put on payroll if you're under that 2,400. You don't have these tax obligations, and now it's like, well, that's out the window. Now I've got to go to the ATM.
Right. So it's it's more on the nanny's end, because that's still reportable income, however they get it, whether we're getting it by Venmo, that they should still be reporting that. I believe it's anything over $400 they need to report. So, they should have been reporting that income anyway. So this is why this is more on the nanny. So if it falls below the 2,400, the family's in the clear. But then the nanny gets the 1090, or the babysitter gets the 1099K, and normally they weren't reporting their income. Now they need to. So that's where they're gonna get swept up.
Right, but you don't think there's going to be any backlash for and we don't know. I'm asking these questions, but we don't know. For a babysitter having a 1099K when it's like, are you really a 1099? We don't know.
Yeah, so for a babysitter, I think that's going to be fine, but we'll see. But a nanny definitely needs to be a W-2 and on the books, and however you pay them, whether you do a payroll service or you figure it out yourself, doing a check, doing a direct deposit is the best way to go. It just makes it's just going to make your life a lot easier come January.
Do you have a lot of your clients sign up? Because obviously you have a lot of clients that sign up for nanny services, but those clients that sign up for nanny services with you, do a lot of them also put their babysitters through you guys on payroll?
It depends on the circumstances. So there's a lot of agencies out there that their specialty is backup care, and all of the babysitters are housed under their payroll. Whereas if that's the difference between the one-off babysitter and kind of your babysitter, the after school babysitter, or somebody who comes regularly on the weekends where it is more of a set schedule. It might be a little bit of fluctuation, but for the most part, you're making a significant amount of money a week. Even if it is only a few $100, it adds up over the course of a month, and then you're at $2,400. So in those situations, yes, but it all depends. It's very situational, but I'll ask somebody. I mean, if you're paying somebody for X amount of hours per week, even if it is only 5 hours per week, and you're only doing it for 6 months out of the year, but you're paying somebody whatever amount of money, it's going to exceed $2,400 pretty easily. And that's when we really break down the dollar amounts and say, hey, well, now you got to put them on payroll. And just to be clear, I wanted to mention this before. It's not like you pay $2,399 and then you hit $2,400. Oh, now we start accounting for taxes. No, every last dollar needs to be accounted for. It's just if you're making under $2,400, you don't need to worry about the taxation. But if you're making over it, everything from $1 up to whatever it goes to needs to be accounted for.
Right. Okay. So essentially, how this affects families is you need to get cash out for babysitters, and you should definitely not be paying your nanny by these apps. Absolutely. And nannies and sitters, you probably need to be educating your families a lot more and saying, I cannot take a cash app anymore, and providing that information prior to the service so it's not a surprise and an uncomfortable discussion at the time that payment is due.
Yep.
Because the general advice right now is do not use them because it could cause complications, especially since there's so much gray area.
Yeah. And from my experience, I mean, especially nowadays, it's crazy how much the industry has shifted. And Rebecca, I know you've seen it over the course of the last couple of years. There's a ton of families looking for nannies. There's only so many nannies out there, at least ones that are qualified and are of the highest quality. So with that being said, I have never seen a group of individuals that have the upper hand on their employer more than I have seen nannies right now. Mm-hmm. Whether it's calling the shots about their hourly amount or they want contributions to their health insurance, but they can go in and say, hey, I get that this is convenient, but we can't do it this way because it's gonna impact me, and it's also gonna impact you. And the family, I mean, they can get in a lot of trouble for misclassification. If somebody goes and they try to get unemployment insurance, they have every right to do so. But when you have no affiliation with this person as your employer, and you go in and you say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith were my employer, well, we have no record of that. Right. It's a 1099. It's just a business to business transaction. Just like Trevor was alluding to, it's just like me paying a landscaper. I mean, the IRS doesn't know. I mean, yes, when they file their taxes and show that 1099, they'll understand. But for the immediate time being, you can go to the unemployment office and say, oh, I worked for them. And they're going to say, no, you didn't. And what that does is raises a red flag. And then Mr. and Mrs. Smith get audited. Next thing you know, they're digging through their personal life. God forbid they own a business. Now they're digging into the business. It's just a mess. And I can't stress that to families enough, is that I get that you want to save a little bit of money. I get that every dollar counts, but is saving $1,000 over the course of 52 weeks in a year worth being penalized $10,000+ for doing something the wrong way? No, scary business.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and that was probably, 2 years ago, one of the biggest takeaways. Well, there's a lot that's happened over the course of the pandemic and how it's changed things for this industry, but was how many nannies got laid off, and then how many issues were caused because you can't file for, you filed for unemployment, and there were a bunch of issues that was brought up because you weren't paid on the books.
Correct. Right.
Yep. And it's not this year. It might not be next year. It might be 5, could be 10 years down the road from now, but somebody's going to get a letter in their mailbox from the IRS that said, hey, you had a nanny back then and they filed for unemployment and you never made a contribution. So now you owe us X amount of money. The IRS in the States don't move quick, but they move, and they'll get their money. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but they will find you.
Yeah, and the other thing is they do talk with each other. So if you run afoul of your state, they're going to notify the IRS saying, hey, we had a problem with the Smith family, not paying their nanny properly. And then now the IRS is looking through your stuff, and they're going to realize you haven't been filing your Schedule H's and taking care of your federal unemployment and your Social Security and Medicare taxes, and it's going to be a big mess.
Yeah.
Why did not realize that it could be delayed like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, the IRS does not move quick, neither do the states, that's for sure. And they're so backed up from the pandemic that's the thing. Yeah. We get people that get notices, oh, you didn't file your quarterly taxes. Well, we did 2 months ago. You're just a couple months behind the scenes. So they don't move quick, but they want their money. Trust me, they want it, and they'll get it.
And in the meantime, the interest is continuing. So you're just going to pay more. Yeah. And I mean, some of these mistakes are unintentional. The nanny could leave on good terms. Let's say the kids grew up and they no longer need a nanny. And now, they parted on good terms. She goes to file for unemployment and oops, didn't mean to get the family in trouble, but you did.
Yeah. Right. Oh gosh. Yeah, see, now I'm going off a completely different topic.
Oh yeah.
What I'm meant to be discussing, because I'm like, oh, I'm interested. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop myself.
Yeah.
But okay, well, those are all my questions. Do you have anything else about this new tax rule that you think would be really great to provide to nannies and sitters and families that we haven't already discussed?
Robert?
You know, like we said, it's pretty tight. So, you know, Venmo and PayPal, I mean, PayPal owns Venmo, so they're the same thing, but you know, Venmo is going to check those personal transactions and seeing if that's on a regular basis. So you're not gonna be able to skirt around doing it that way. It's going to look like goods and services because it's you know, that regular amount that's going into your account every week or every 2 weeks. So really, it's, you know, I don't see a lot of loopholes here. My other piece of advice is talk to an accountant or a tax attorney and see what they think. I wouldn't necessarily use the family's accountant because, you know, they work on the behalf of the family. That's where Patrick mentioned, not to get off on another tangent, but how accountants want to classify nannies as independent contractors because they're working for the family. And hey, if the nanny's an independent contractor, then the family doesn't owe taxes. The family's happy, but it's the wrong way to do it. So, you know, find someone independent and you can, you know, bring this up with them and get their feedback on it. But this is kind of what we're seeing and kind of what we're working through here on that piece of it.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for hopping on this evening and sharing your expertise and insight. I really appreciate it. We can, like, there's so much gray area for this new tax rule, especially for nannies and sitters. So I really appreciate you sharing the information that you currently do have. And we're going to probably learn a lot more come 2023.
Yes,
we will. We'll see how this all pans out. And I think that's going to be the biggest deciding factor on how we move forward and what this webinar is geared towards next year when we do it.
yes, we live in interesting times, as they say. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It was lovely chatting with you, gents. And thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your expertise. And that's all we have time for this evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Rebecca, thank you as always. Hopefully I'll see you around at a conference at some point soon. And thank you for everybody who was in attendance this evening.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank
well,
you.
have a good night. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Take care.
Good night.